I'm making this recording in response to Dr. David Starkey's interview with Darren Grimes of the YouTube channel Reasoned. I saw the interview and I was thinking of making this response. But then, after I saw Dr. David Starkey's apology, I thought not to. But the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the idea, the more I realized I had to do it, because it was a chance for me not to pick at Dr. David Starkey, because I actually used to love Dr. David Starkey very much. So this recording is not to pick at him, but to call out those kinds of views and anybody that might harbor them, not just in British society, but all over the world. And within British society, anyone that harbors such views, especially amongst parliamentarians and the elite. And there's a reason why I'm focusing on parliamentarians and the elite, but let's continue. Yes, so the interview starts.
Is this an attempt, just a naked attempt, to delegitimize the entire, never mind the curriculum, but everything that Britain has ever stood for?
And indeed the West in general. I mean, that's the intention. I mean, that extraordinary...
You were discussing the Black Lives Matter activist, and this was in relation to a certain incident where you dedicate 2 paragraphs to it, indeed, where a group of lads who it appears were in the household's cavalry, and they were appalled at the mess and desecration left behind by these activists. So they turned up with bin bags, water, detergent and scrubbing brushes and began the great clear up. Now, they were accosted during this great cleanup by this young white woman for daring to do so, for having the temerity to start scrubbing a national monument in this country that had been desecrated by these activists. I've got 2 questions on that. Could you just, first of all, tell us what you think this says about the brand of activism of these Black Lives Matter activists? And secondly, does the actions of these altruistic young men give you hope for the future?
What does it tell us? Well, you've given a very good picture of the incident itself, but you've left out the most important thing, which is what the young woman sounded like. She had a slightly abrasive, whiny, whinny, aggrieved, upper-class voice, and it came over something like this. What? You couldn't even lead through a day, not a single day, you and your precious monument. And the lads were very polite. They just ignored her. They continued working. And of course, she's then very, very aggrieved at being ignored. So what does she do? Have you ever been, come down from your rural fastness in Battersea, have you ever been to Harrods? You will know there's a certain kind of woman who shops at Harrods. And if they're not getting instant prompt attention, you can, excuse me. And that was the voice. And it was the voice of entitled, privileged, needless to say, she's at Chelsea College. Needless to say, she's reading fine arts. Needless to say, she is wanting a career in, my dear, film design and, you know. Here are the lads in the household cavalry. Sensible, straightforward, shocked. I mean, after all, what are these precious monuments? Somebody has just tried to set fire to the Union Jack on the Senate. And let's just say that again. To set fire to the monument of the millions of dead, white, black, Indian, who fought for freedom in 2 world wars. They deliberately sought out the national flag. Right? Your precious victims, excuse me. I think it tells you everything. It tells you, well, it tells you about the white support.
Now, let me start by making this clear. I'm not here to be conservative or liberal. I don't really care. But you start off poking at how she sounded or how she sounds. But to be honest, Dr. David, you sound just like her. You know, you sound just stiff upper lip, nose up in the air, just like her. But the difference between you and her is she recognizes the horrible part of Britain's history. You say she's privileged. I'm sorry, Dr. David, look at you with your library of books in your house, probably somewhere in West London. As far as I'm concerned, you are privileged too. The only difference between you and her is that she's privileged with a conscience. You are not. You and the likes of you are not.
It tells, because of course that's a very important part of Black lives, these are the people who work themselves up into a lather about leaving the European Union, about vote leave. These are the people who tie themselves in knots about, despite the fact, of course, they usually have lots of money, live in big houses, drive big cars. They get wildly excited about extinction. It's a class. It's pure class. It's a form of upper class, middle class, arrogant patronage of those who are the less educated, didn't go to university, didn't read social sciences, and the poor working sons of toil. From whom I.
Dr. David, like I said, I used to love. In fact, you taught me British history. You taught me the core of British history. I used to be your biggest fan. But watching this interview, I realize your view of history is very narrow. You've just talked about her being part of this upper class. Meanwhile, I'm seeing you as the same. Further on in this interview, you claim to have come from working class. But you seem to still think you're working class. You've coined some term now that I'm sure will probably start getting banded about the media. White support, to malign anyone with views similar to the woman you're maligning now. And if there's white people supporting black people who've been oppressed and are still being oppressed, does that make them bad?
Happen to come, despite the fact that it's rather well disguised.
Dr. Starkey, can I ask you a question about, you mentioned your background there for a second. If we focus on your background, and I just give you a brief overview of my own, I've got 2 brothers back home in County Durham, both younger than I am, both victims of the COVID crisis, both the grandsons of a miner, both from fatherless homes, both in and out of precarious work. And I look at both of them and I think, where is your white privilege? Where is your evidence of white privilege that these middle class activists want to try and suggest that you have? Now, when we think about your background and your hard work and determination is what has got you to your success in life, that wasn't from any white privilege, was it?
No, it wasn't. Now, Darren, this is a really important point. I have just corrected a biography that somebody is publishing for an event that I'm doing, which is taken from the Waterstones website. And what I said to them was, I really don't like this because it's got a tone of whiny victimhood about it. I mean, if I wanted to play the game of dear me, I'm a victim too, it would be very easy for me to do it. Mm-hmm. My father left school. I'm obviously old, so my parents go back to, they were both born in 1907. My father left school part-time at the age of 11. He left school full-time at the age of 13. He was a barber's boy before he left. His own father died when he was 11. His mother had died in infancy. He is brought up by a stepmother. On the day that he completed his apprenticeship in September 1928, he is sacked from Platt Brothers, the engineering firm that made cotton machinery. He is then unemployed for 7 years, and in a state of such desperate poverty that when he was diagnosed with this imaginary disease called porphyria, which we now deal with by cleaning between our teeth and get bleeding gums, then it was yet another imaginary disease, I think a bit like COVID, and the dentist recommended you had all your teeth out. He did. And to save 2 6 12.5 pence, he had them out without anaesthetic. The upper jaw on one day and the lower jaw the next. Right, that's playback. And I rage.
Okay. Now we're talking about now you're talking about white privilege. Good. Darren, I've heard your story. Dr. Starkey, I've heard your story. And yeah, touching. Your dad had to have all his teeth extracted to save 2.6 pence. Touching. Now, that's the average story for every other African. Every other African you have colonized. And you see, this is a big part of why I wanted to make this video, this recording, so that I can explain white privilege to you. You and anyone else who refuses or doesn't understand it yet. White privilege. Yes, I've heard your stories, and I'm sorry, well, tough. That's every day in Africa for almost everybody over there because of what you did to Africa. Yeah? I'm talking about white privilege, slavery, and the legacy of slavery. Everything the slaves built for no money that you still love, well, you still live in and enjoy today. That's white privilege. Because those slaves never got a chance to build anything for themselves. Talking about white privilege, colonialism and neo-colonialism and the structure they left, which keeps African countries in poverty at your sufferance. Darren, the fact that you live in a so-called first world country at the sufferance of those you call third world countries, that's white privilege. Yeah? Is it clear now? Is it a bit clear? Well, I could carry on, but suddenly the whole video will become about white privilege. But let's continue.
I simply become, I'm not normally incoherent, but I become incoherent with rage when some privileged little prat like a Laura Penny or the rest of them ventures to challenge me on those points.
What is the scholarship behind this movement, though? Because if you consider the fact that I think this country is quite unique in Europe for the fact that it enjoys incredibly good, at least for now, until these activists and a left-wing media tries to stir up, I think, I would go as far as saying hatred between communities. But we have fantastic race relations. We are one of the most richly diverse countries in the world, especially London. And that seems to work, for the most part, I think, pretty well. So what do you think explains the scholarship, the thinking behind this? for this entire movement to actually be imported from the United States of America to our shores?
Well, I think there is, I mean, you summarized it brilliantly. I think that one of the great problems was that the West Indian blacks in Britain arrived, the famous Windrush and whatever. They arrived with a singular culture of their own, very Christian, evangelical, participatory, and all the rest of it. But that is somehow, and I'm not quite sure why or how, because let me be honest, I am no expert in this, but it seems to have got lost. And instead, blacks in Britain, certainly the politically active of them, have tended to borrow from America, and they borrow from America both in as it were formal politics, but also lifestyle, dress, music, the whole gangster culture, the putting of slavery central into the picture, completely ignoring the fact, of course, that we had our debate. Everybody says, isn't it time Britain had its debate on slavery? We tore ourselves apart over slavery from the 1760s to the 1830s. We had this gigantic debate, which finally culminated in the abolition of slavery, not only in Britain, but in the Empire, and using the might of the British Navy, then the equivalent of all other navies in the world put together to wipe out the slave trade universally. But that's, that is, what is it? It's 100 and coming up to 200 years ago.
Now, you say the West Indians, when they first came to the UK, had their own culture, but that got lost because they started copying the Americans. Well, they started copying the Americans because they were still being oppressed. I mean, have we suddenly forgotten that things like Stephen Lawrence and all the other riots and Brixton riot, all that stuff happened? Have we forgotten that? Now, as for Black Lives Matter, now I'm not a Black Lives Matter activist. I'm not a front row supporter. But I even understand that slogan. Because in today's world, as a black person, it's clear to me that black people are treated like their lives ain't shit. Their lives don't matter. Well, what country are you talking about? As long as it's a Caucasoid or Mongoloid country, or even in their own countries, because they have all these warrant chief presidents installed by your countries. You treat us like our lives don't matter. Maybe you can't understand it because you're in a privileged position. Maybe that's why you can't understand it. No one ever said no other life mattered. Nah. But for people to stand up and try and make you acknowledge that a certain life matters, you have to ask yourself the question, why? And then, I mean, here we go again. Oh, Britain, we tore ourselves apart 200 years ago. We tore ourselves. That was 190 years ago. Here we go again. The same. Why don't you just move on? The same statement you guys always come up with. Why don't you just move on? That was 200 years ago. Hold on, I'm sorry. Yes, maybe you might not be as brutal as your great-grandfather, but you've not bothered to change the system he created, the fundamental structure. So stop patronizing me.
"190 years ago."
I mean, this is classic trying to avoid accountability. Classic. What nonsense. Oh, that was 200 years ago. So, oh yeah, just forget it. Oh, you're not in chains anymore. So, how about all the lives that was wasted?
very, very firmly in the past. But what's happened is, as I
very, very, very firmly in the past. Really? So if slavery is over, what was colonialism? What is neo-colonialism? Why is all the countries you colonized back? I mean, why are you even still? I mean, the other day in Parliament, Lord Palmer, or whatever his name is, was still saying, "Why don't we recolonize Zimbabwe?" You see, this is the. Why don't we recolonize Zimbabwe? You see, this is the mentality I'm talking about. I mean, France, up until a few months ago, still controlled the currency of all their former colonies. And you're telling me slavery is over. See, for any member of the British public watching this video, understand that slavery never ended. All that happened was a change of tactic. They just realized that they just thought, okay, let's stop taking the slaves from their land to a new land. Let's just enslave them on their land. And that's what's still running today.
Said that black culture has been, at every level, musically, politically, whatever, has been the direct importation of what I think is the worst side of American black culture. We began by talking about victimhood. Now, blacks in America were faced with that great choice. They're faced with Martin Luther King, which is black pride, which is black courage, which is character and all of that. They, by and large, rejected that. And instead, they've gone for Al Sharpton. They've gone for violence and victimhood. And
you see, you guys think, I mean, racists actually think they're cleverer than everyone else. Now, I'm David Starkey. I'm not saying you're racist, but, you know, and I'm by no means saying you are, but the mentality leaves a lot of questions. You could be naive, but, you know, me as a black person, something that sounds racist or tends to racism is what it is. You could say, I'm naive about it or whatever. But to me, it is what it is. Now, I'm used to the reverse accusation of victimhood and violence. I know that it's a verbal weapon used on me as a black person. As soon as you say victimhood, that's supposed to make me feel guilty, like I'm not trying. And as soon as you say violence, that's supposed to make me feel like I'm some sort of savage, and, you know, I can't civilize myself. You see, you talk about Martin Luther King and versus Al Sharpton. Well, when you had Martin Luther King, what did you do? You killed him. We already tried Martin Luther King. You didn't want that. And Al Sharpton's what's left. So what do you expect? What? No, seriously. So what? You're trying to control my own narrative? What? Because you rewrote my history. You're on top of that trying to control my own narrative of the very present. What, you think I'm intimidated by the words victimhood and violence anymore? No, not anymore. Look, Britain, the structures you created from slavery are still there. You must change them. They cannot continue. This generation is the last generation. From here on in, we're not taking it anymore.
I'm afraid that's what we are actually seeing in the Black Lives Matter, which is the fusion of that what seems to me to be a profoundly destructive and nihilistic creed. And it's deeply, again, Darren, what renders me again speechless about this is the...
You see, Britain keeps trying to absolve themselves of accountability, trying to, we're importing American culture. And like, well, Britain, we've torn ourselves apart 200 years ago, and we don't treat people as bad here as they're treated in America. No, hold on, Britain. You were central to that history. You were the main contractor for supplying slaves to the so-called New World. You signed the Asiento contract. You were central in that history. So don't try and absolve yourself of accountability. As long as the effects of that history are still being felt today and are still going on, you are still central to it. As long as the countries in Africa are still under neo-colonialism and are still being exploited, yes, not by your, the government is just in the background, but yes, with the middleman, your secret service agencies, MI6, and then using your companies to exploit the African countries, Britain, you're still central to it.
Principal victims of it are young black men. Mm-hmm. Young black men are not killed by the police in Britain. There hasn't been one, I think, in 3 years. Few whites have been killed by the police, and several have died in custody, usually because of drugs. But the people who kill young black men are other young black men in terrifyingly large numbers. Black lives only matter politically when it's a white who takes them, or an honorary white who is a policeman. A black life taken by a black has got absolutely no political significance at all and is never talked about. And we've had these incidents interspersing the generations in London, in which you have seen, black on black violence, or you have actually seen what I also care about profoundly, and which is a Muslim or Kurdish immigrant on gays. All of those things completely set aside. Because what we have now is not a genuine concern about racial advancement or whatever racial justice means. It's the use of, as it were, black as a kind of insulating tape.
I mean, this is another buzzword you throw around in the media, black on black crime. I mean, first of all, you keep people in a situation similar to being crabs in a bucket. And then anytime they clash with each other, you put a telescopic lens on it and blow it out of proportion. I mean, that brings to mind the saying, you give a dog a bad name before you hang it. Look, we're wise to all this bullshit now. Yeah? So, I mean, and then going back to Black Lives Matter. So if black people who've generally been oppressed and are still being oppressed stand up to say, stop killing other black people, and then because the person that was killed, well, I'm talking about George Floyd now, because the person that was killed is in America, where, like you said, they've had it worse, and then the people standing up to say, well, Black Lives Matter, they're in Britain, where they've not had it as bad. Are you saying that they should keep quiet because they haven't had it as bad, or because, well, they've had it better, so they should keep quiet? David Starkey, oh man. I mean, like I said, this is not even about you, but I know there's many British people that think like this. And it's like, I used to ask when, I remember in the late 2000s, there was a question I used to ask all my friends. Where's all the racists? So after Tony Blair came in, where's all the racists? I mean, you know, they were all walking around during Thatcher's time, and then suddenly, well, Thatcher, and then suddenly Major, then Tony Blair came in, and it was like I said, I don't particularly care about the conservative or the liberal ends of the spectrum. But what I'm trying to highlight in this video is to say, whether races disappeared or not, the key thing is the mentality. Has British mentality fundamentally changed? That's the key question here. And if someone of David Starkey's caliber, who I consider the upper echelon of British society, is coming up with stuff like this, who his peers are parliamentarians and the people at the helm of affairs of British society, and royalty, I dare to say, then not much has changed since slavery colonization times. Do you in your mind, you just think things have changed because, well, we don't have them in chains no more, we're not whipping them anymore? But I'm sorry, the system that enabled you to have my forefathers in chains, those haven't changed. You having them in chains has changed, but those systems that enabled you to have them in chains hasn't changed. And this is what I'm calling out.
Around which you can wrap all sorts of dangerous ideas. I think it's really very symbolic that our wonderful, Formula One champion, that man, that passionate believer in human rights and in education, and was so keen to advance them in his native country, whose flag he repeatedly drapes himself in, that he lives in Monaco to make sure he pays absolutely no taxes whatever towards any of the causes that he espouses. He is now going to drive an all-black car and have an all-black team, and they will all wear all-black overalls. I mean, sorry. How can, this is cartoon. This isn't thinking. This is cartoon.
Now, I'm not here to defend Hamilton. He's a man. He can do what he wants. And yes, I particularly have no views on wearing black, painting everything black, as in the literal color or material black. But, people are choosing to use this as a symbol now. But you can't help but still attack it. The irony is, you coined the term black to classify a group of people.
If it weren't so dangerous. It's simply funny. The man should be a laughingstock. Hamilton. But you mentioned a much more interesting word, scholarship. One of the things that's really striking is how problematic the scholarship behind, say, Black history is, which again is one of the underliers. David Olusoga, who is an interesting and quite able young historian, has been one of those throwing his weight around in all of this. In the days when I sat on the Blue Plaque Committee in London, the thing that accords immortality with those rather elegantly designed, they're actually porcelain, blue and white porcelain set into the wall. In the days when it was serious and we properly scrutinized people whose names were going to appear, and we had a serious historian working for us whilst we did it, there was even then pressure to acknowledge blacks, be it Mary Seacole, be it Mary Price, be it Equiano, people like this. But whenever our historian got to work, for example, on Mary Seacole, we now have this enormous statue of her at St Thomas's Hospital, completely overwhelming Florence Nightingale. And she's elevated. We actually named some of the emergency hospitals after her to set up alongside Florence Nightingale. Well, Mary Seacole was indeed. She was indeed at Scutari, she was indeed in the Crimea. But whilst Florence Nightingale was in the Crimea, desperately trying to manage a great hospital, desperately trying to reform nursing, anaesthesia, and the whole business of antiseptics, everything like that, what was Mary Seacole doing? She was running the officers' mess. She was keeping the officers supplied with alcohol, brandy, and cigars. That's what Mary Seacole was doing. And the attempt at seeing equivalence there is simply preposterous. Somebody like Mary Price, who was a quite interesting figure, and when we looked at her, we got quite excited about it. Here is a woman, black woman, 1 tick, 2 ticks, autobiography, 3 ticks. Then, of course, we discover that the autobiography is ghosted by a white woman. And as far as I can see, is at least half fiction. You see what I mean?
But if we list some of the things that Seacole is routinely described as, she's routinely described as a pioneer nurse, the first nurse practitioner, the original lady with the lamp, and a battlefield nurse who worked under fire. Are you dispelling those myths?
All of these things are complete rubbish. I mean, she's there. As I said, she's running the officers' mess. Even Olusegun actually says that. He admits that. So the whole of this movement to erect statues to her is utterly false. It's phony. It's the invention of a false past. Because again, there is this desperate claim to assert that we've always been racially diverse. It's not true.
Okay. So, I mean, you have a history of lying about history. I mean, I'm talking about Britain here, or the people that control Britain. You have a history about lying about history. And now it's coming back to bite. Suddenly, you can't understand the confusion you've caused. You lie to the Africans about their history. You lie about your own history, all because you're trying to manipulate people. And somewhere along the line now, you've got lost in your own confusion.
Of course, blacks in seaports. There were blacks in Henry VIII's Navy. And there's a famous black trumpeter. There's never been a more famous, non-famous person than somebody called John Blank. In other words, he's a very black, almost certainly Moorish North African, who was one of the Henry VIII's trumpeters. And of course, his real name is not Blank, it's Blanc. So he's called John White in French because he's very black. He's there as a kind of, and clearly a good trumpeter. He's there because he's a bit exotic and a bit different. The attempts at inventing a biography for this man, and here's the first chapter in a splendid book by a fine young historian called Miranda Kaufman, and she goes through trying to find black people in Tudor England. You can find a few. Once you've found them, you can find out almost nothing about them. Mm-hmm. And what is striking, if you look at the chapters in that book, the first half of each chapter is written in italic. Why? Because it's a fiction. It's what probably might have been, could have been. If we you draw on other examples, maybe it looked like that. Now, no, come on.
Well, I mean, that leads me on to a really important question then, because I mean, I'm not sure I should admit to this at risk of diving straight into sycophancy, but I imagine I learned a hell of a lot more from watching your documentaries over the years than I ever did in the state education system as far as history is concerned. But I wonder how long it might be, Dr. Starkey, before there are calls to remove...
I agree. I agree, Darren. I learnt a lot about British history from Dr. Starkey. Yeah, in fact, I learnt quite a bit. Well,
even them, any trace of them from the internet. And in what light, if we think about in the context of these, of monument sacking, as it were, and we think about calls to decolonize the curriculum, what do you think is a good strategy to combat this as a historian? Because if we think about, there was one, you must have seen this, so a pretty good example of a BBC Horrible Histories sketch on Brexit Britain and our xenophobic history. I mean, do our children stand a chance?
Taught by people like that? No. And one is what has got to happen, and a central part of the problem is the failure of the conservative of the right to be as passionate about its beliefs as the left. And again, the whole of the Brexit vote, and particularly the general election result, the collapse of the red wall and its re-erection as a blue wall in the north of England. The fundamental thing is a basic elementary sense of patriotism. But that has almost become a vice which dare not speak its name. The love of country is a love that dare not speak its name. Gay love now never shuts up, of course. But patriotism is ashamed, is silent, is suppressed. And what is so preposterous about this, Darren? How would I go about tackling it? I would say quite simply, you cannot decolonize the curriculum, because you, Black Lives Matter, are wholly and entirely a product of white colonization.
now this one's for Darren. Darren, you talk about monument sacking. I have a question for you. What do you call civilization sacking? When Britain went around Africa sacking civilizations, all in the name of they are pagans, they are savages. It brings to question, what's really civilization? As what you guys call civilization, what is it really? Is it really civilization or savagery? It brings to question. You talk about monument sacking, but you refuse to talk about civilization sacking. Those people you met in the forests of West Africa, were they really savages? Were they really pagans like you claimed? Those people you enslaved in the forests from the forests of West Africa, were they savages? If they were, then their evolution must be really unique, considering what they are today. And then you talk about decolonizing the curriculum and about horrible histories. Yes, people with such mentality exist because of your curriculum. If you choose only to teach the parts of your history that says, oh, great this, great that, with this, with that, we conquered this, we conquered that, then this mentality will carry on. And I'm sorry, the world is changing. You will not catch up. If you do not decolonize your history and take into consideration your horrible history, which I choose to call the evil part of your history, because Britain, what you did in the past was evil. It was. I'm not here to mince words. Slavery is the greatest crime against humanity.
You are not culturally black Africans. You would...
And can I say something? Britain has a very xenophobic history, as much as it's multicultural today, but there's something fundamentally xenophobic about it. Because when your forefathers came to my forefathers, we welcomed them, not knowing you had treacherous intent. when my people come over here, you put them in cage, you lock them up. Even though they've got no treacherous intent, they just want to be a human being. All because of what you've left them with in Africa. There's a friend of mine, a guy called Jerry, and this guy became a legend because of what happened to him. He got caught by immigration and was about to be deported. And he asked the immigration officer, why are you deporting me? When your forefathers came, why are you asking? He asked the guy, why are you asking me for my visa and passport? When your forefathers came to my forefathers in Africa, did my forefathers ask your forefathers for their visa and passport?
Die in seconds if you were dumped back in Black Africa because you wouldn't know how to cope. You're a product yourself, oppressed. And what is so preposterous about this, Darren? How would I go about tackling it? I would say quite simply, you cannot decolonize the curriculum because you, Black Lives Matter, are wholly and entirely a product of white colonization. You are not culturally Black Africans. You would die in seconds if you were dumped back in Black Africa because you wouldn't know how to cope. You're a product yourselves of cultural and racial mix.
Oh, man. David Starkey. I used to have a lot of respect for you because you're a historian. You're supposed to know a lot of history. But like I said earlier, it's become so clear to me that you only have a narrow sliver of history in your head. I know more history than you. Thanks for the lessons when I was younger. But as of today, I think I should be teaching you history. You talk about the people doing Black Lives Matter, that if they were dumped back in Africa today, they would die in seconds. Well, I'm sorry, if you knew your history, you'll know that Britain caused Africa the way it is. Africa came in, destroyed the place with the help of the Arabs and left it the way it is, which she still maintains today the way it is because it's to Britain's benefit. Britain and her fellow colonialists, France and the rest of them. You're supposed to be a historian. Come on. What, you really think you know the history and no one else knows nothing?
And again, what is very remarkable about the pulling down of the statues, and normally statues are pulled down, be it Hitler, be it the French kings in the time of the French Revolution, or indeed our own kings in the time of the Civil War, because people have been defeated. What has happened, of course, is that the only reason that these young Black protesters are here isn't it slavery. It's only because of the great African diaspora.
So if they dump them back in Africa, they'll die in seconds. And that the only reason why they are here, these young Africans are here, is because of, indeed, slavery. Wait, so are you saying that you did them a favor? Well, you did them a favor by enslaving their ancestors. So because they are now in Britain, and if you took them back to Africa, they would die in seconds. So you've done them a favor. Really? You see, this is the mentality I'm talking about. This is the very mentality I'm talking about. Meanwhile, the reason why Africa is the way it is today, fucked up as it is today, is because of you, Britain, and your fellow colonialists. And you've kept it the way it is. You've kept that system, milking the continent. You call yourself first world at the sufferance of what the people you call third world. And from this interview, you're not even grateful. Listen, listen. Stop with the gimmicks. Stop with the gimmicks. Real change has to happen. We'll fight back. This has gone on too long. 400 years. Nah. It gets to a point where people just say, you know what? Don't be freaking silly. Don't be silly.
The compulsory diaspora because of slavery. What, of course, that brings you up to confronting is, of course, slavery was not the equivalent of the Holocaust. And
wait, hold on. Wait, hold on. Slavery was not the equivalent of the Holocaust, you said. Oh my freaking God. Oh. Hold on. Oh, so we should just chill. Yeah, it wasn't as bad as the Holocaust, so you guys should just take a chill pill, yeah? Really? David Starkey, come on, really? What, and you're a historian? If you really knew your history, I'm sure it would be clear to you. Well, look, it's clear to anybody that has studied history well enough to realize that the transatlantic and the trans-Saharan slave trades against the same people, the so-called Negroes, the people you call the Negroes, the sub-Saharan Africans, was the greatest, most dastardly, most evil, most conceited crime ever against humanity, or even against an animal. So don't patronize me. This is when things like this happen, you lose respect for people. I can't even believe you said that. And the thing is, like I keep saying, there's a lot of people in Britain with such views. Oh, it wasn't as bad as the Holocaust, so get over it. Oh, that was 200 years ago, so get over it. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you just think slavery, well, yeah, you just had them in chains and whipped them and had them work in the farms. Really? How about the castrations? How about the throwing them off the ships in the middle of a storm just so you could go claim insurance? How about the turning them into leather so that you could make shoes and wallets? Come on. Britain, you have a horrible history you need to face. And you will face it if you want to hack it in the modern world. You will face it.
What again, there's no point in arguing against globalization or Western civilization. They are all products of it. We are all products of it.
So we should just put up or shut up, right? Yeah? We should just take it as we see it. You know, okay, so you know what? Just instead of just pretending, why don't you just kill us all? Just kill us off. So that you wouldn't even need to have such interviews. You just get on with your life. You know, just save yourself the headache or guilt trip, whatever. Just kill us all. Kill off all the black people. Just wipe them out.
The honest teaching of the British Empire is to say, quite simply, it is the first key stage of world globalization. It's probably the most important moment in human history, and it is still with us. Its consequences are still on, and generally speaking, in most ways, actually fruitful. There are downsides, again, as the Brexit vote demonstrated. So that's how you go about tackling it. And as for the idea, as I said, that slavery is this kind of terrible disease that dare not speak its name. It only dare not speak its name, Darren, because we settled it nearly 200 years ago. We don't normally go on about the fact that Roman Catholics once upon a time didn't have vote and weren't allowed to have their own churches because we had Catholic emancipation. And you know what? We had Catholic emancipation at pretty much exactly the same time that we got rid of slavery in the 1830s. We don't go on about that because it's part of history. It's a question that's settled. Again, it's the point you made. It's American import. It's because, of course, in America, it took civil war to deal with the question of slavery. And even then, as part of the very, very imperfect settlement, as we know, slavery in the South was substituted.
You see, you sound like someone with no guilty conscience whatsoever. Just because you weren't the one whipping anyone or chaining anyone up. So, and then you keep going on about settling it 200 years ago. Meanwhile, if you knew your British history, Dr. David, you know Britain was central to it. You can't tell me you've never heard of the Asiento contract, where Britain not just got the contract to supply British territories in the New World or the Americas with slaves, but they were also supplying the French, the Spanish, everybody else with slaves. This was Britain at the center of the slave trade. So stop telling me you settled it 200 years ago. What, with William Wilberforce and the emancipation? Oh, really? Oh, like William Wilberforce just stood up and fought for slavery and it ended. How about all the black people that were fighting and dying, running away before William Wilberforce? 250 years before William Wilberforce. And you're telling me you settled it 200 years ago. Oh, you settled it and then you came up with colonialism. Really? And then you're going to tell me, oh yeah, but we left. We ended colonialism. And then you carried on with neo-colonialism and your companies. Really? Stop patronizing us, man. We're not that stupid anymore. You've got no guilty conscience whatsoever.
For by a system of organized repression, economic, social, and everything else in the form of segregation. But that's never been true in Britain. In other words, we're having a false history forced upon us.
What do you think?
What do you... False history? Wait, hold on. You keep saying Britain, like as if Britain wasn't central to the slave trade. Hold on. Most of your big legacy companies, they're legacy companies today because of the slave trade. Even your so-called Church of England. The Church of England owned slaves. So what are you on about? Oh, so just because Lloyd's and Church of England, Church of England owned slaves that were being whipped and chained in Jamaica, it doesn't concern Britain just because it didn't happen on British soil. Come on, David Starkey.
It explains that though, because you have, I've watched you speak about this in the past. You speak about the fact that in this country we have a very quiet patriotism, a very quiet but proud patriotism. But this strikes me that, and I'm not sure whether or not it's the loss of Christianity, it's the loss of faith in general, that we see almost religious style movements towards the National Health Service. We see religious style movements towards Extinction Rebellion. We see religious style movements toward the Black Lives Matter activism. You know, what explains this, what I can only describe as a sort of crisis of confidence that seeks to delegitimize our history in order to try and import America's history to these shores?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is, I don't know whether you've ever read Wicked Old G.K. Chesterton. Now, as somebody whose statue should be torn down. Marvellous, plump G.K. Chesterton, a sort of Catholic fascist, but wonderful poet. And he's got this amazing line when people stop believing in God, they don't believe in nothing, they believe in anything. I think this is the key thing, that what we've seen is this enormous transfer of religious belief, displacement, if you like, into other areas. And you've listed a few of them: Black Lives Matter, the environment. Oh, for God's sake. You know, if you actually look at people like David Attenborough and the obvious Greta, these are like figures out of. Well, what they do, they really remind me of the life of Brian. One of their sketches, you know, the Greta Thunberg she's exactly like a mad medieval child saint. You know, the Middle Ages were filled with these bloody child saints, and the other extreme from the child saint is the incredibly mad, doddery, white-haired old man, you know, David Attenborough, doom. And again, nature worship. It's nature worship, you know, man bad, nature good, rewilding, you know. We want more wolves. We want to see more human beings torn apart, you know, by savage animals. So it's nature worship. It's environmentalism was one of the most obvious examples, because again, what all of these things seem to be about is a form of self-hatred, and people don't really believe, do they, that we actually want to go back to the Middle Ages. But the idea that we are going to stop global emissions, stopping global emissions can only be achieved if we abandon industrialization. Industrialization is what is responsible for increased life expectancy. You don't live longer because you are virtuous. You really do. You live longer because you are cleaner, because you are well fed, because you have heat in winter, you have cool in summer, and you have modern medicine, and you have modern antibiotics. And all of those things, I'm afraid, are a product of wicked old industrialization and wicked old capitalism.
And the abolishment of the slave trade itself, you've argued, haven't you, that that's partly responsible?
The only reason remember again, this preposterous notion that Britain is singularly guilty, because it's utterly silly. Every civilization before our own has essentially depended on slavery. The glories that were Greece, the split.
No. I disagree, Dr. David. Britain is guilty. Britain was central to the slave trade. They didn't start it, but they played a big part in it. No, not every civilization practiced slavery. Slavery is fundamentally a European, Asian thing. It was not practiced in Africa until the Arabs and you, Europeans, came. I repeat, not every civilization practiced slavery. And I'll give you evidence. The Aborigine civilization in Australia did not practice slavery until you came and destroyed their civilization. The Republican-natured civilizations in West Africa and their Bantu cousins and their Khoisan cousins did not practice slavery. Please explain to me how a bushman, a so-called bushman, who holds slaves wandering around in the forest or in the bush, in the bushes of South Africa. No, not every civilization practiced slavery. So please, Mr. Historian, stop trying to hide history. Look.
Was right. Slavery. Every civilization before our own has essentially depended on slavery. The glories that were Greece, the splendor that was Rome, slavery. Every time Mary Beard gets up and waxes lyrical, she needs to tell us it was the slave what did it. Even the fine arts in Greece and Rome were the work of slaves. Everything, because there is no alternative.
I'm sorry, you're wrong again. There's an alternative to slavery. And that alternative is do it your freaking self. Do it yourself, DIY. I mean, so-called Britain should know about this. You even have a company an industry based around DIY. So yes, there's an alternative to slavery. Don't give me that. Like I said, not every civilization, like you try to miseducate the world, practiced slavery. I can debate anyone on that for days. Not every civilization, I repeat, not every civilization all over the world throughout history practiced slavery. There are cultures, civilizations that had absolutely no slavery until they were corrupted by foreign influence, mainly from the Western Europeans and the Arabs. Look, Britain is as guilty as guilt itself in slavery. Go and read your own history. Go and read your own history. You wrote it. Unless you want to lie to yourself. And look, this is the 21st century. This slavery has to end now. To all parliamentarians, all members of parliament, any of you that happens to come across this video, to all people that influence British society, any of you that happens to come across this video, your influence in Africa needs to end. Starting with Biafra. Biafra must be free. France, to any French politicians that hears this, Ambazonia must be free. And then the nonsense going on in Congo must stop. And for good measure, please, Spain, give so-called Sahrawi Republic a Fulani country. Let them leave the rest of us in West Africa alone. Please. But this nonsense must stop. Biafra must be free. Ambazonia must be free. The nonsense going on in Congo must stop.
Thing is human physical labor. The great transformation in human history actually begins in the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, and this is, we think of the Middle Ages as being much less sophisticated than Greece and Rome, which in many ways they were. But if you actually look at medieval Europe, it's astonishing engineering skill. You get the beginning of mechanical clocks, you have mechanical organs. You look at the technical skill of, say, an medieval cathedral, something like the end of the Seventh Chapel at Westminster Abbey. You look at the technical skill of that and compare it with the architecture of Greece and Rome, which is basically just, concrete domes and pillars and beams, but the sheer complexity of building a fan vault. So you get one of the peculiarities of Western European civilization, on which industrialization builds, is this extraordinary technological sophistication. The quality of a sailing ship, of a late medieval, early modern sailing ship, compared with the magnificence of a Roman ship, the Quinquarim of Nineveh from distant Ophir and all that lot, just powered by lots and lots of slaves. Even before you get steam, we were able to use sail in a much more impressive and in a much more effective way. But it's industrialization that replaces slavery. It's no accident that the movement for abolition is late 18th century, exactly the moment that industrialization takes off. And we have to understand that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is classic British arrogance. I mean, like, industrialization now came along and saved the slaves. Listen, it's clear to me now I should be teaching Dr. David Starkey. And from our own understanding of history, I think the Western civilizations set the world back, set the whole world back about 200 years. Even with their so-called industrialization, because the amount of people they killed, all in the name of slavery, and their own version of so-called version of progress, that set the world back. Because it's not like the people they were killing were actually savages like they claimed. Because if you know your history, you understand that the people they were killing and enslaving were craftsmen. They were farmers. They were skilled people. They had their own culture, their own history, their own tradition. Just because you had a gun. So, just because you had a gun and you can't... So, are you asking me to believe that what you call civilization, that you measure by conquest and destruction, is actually civilization? How civilized is that? How civilized is claiming to be you're civilized? You meet another group of people, and instead of negotiating, trading, because realistically there is no need for war unless you want to rob and loot them. Because that's what you went around the world doing. You went round, and even when they negotiated with you, you still just brought a war upon them just so that you could have all the loot to yourself. You looted everywhere dry. Now you call yourself third world. Oh, we're rich. Further entrenching your already messed up view that these people were savages. Now, yeah, you're rich, they're poor. Before it was you're civilized, they were savages. Now it's you're rich, they're poor. Pure arrogance. Listen, Britain, you and Western Europe set the world back 200 years minimum with the madness you unleashed. All in the name of whatever you choose to call industrialization or I don't know, whatever your so-called civilization. Because upon all the civilizations you claim to have built, none is as legendary or as great as Egypt. And not only Egypt even. Yes, Egypt is gone today, but none lasted as long as Egypt. So don't sell me your whitewashed version of history like you're the one who's done it all. No. We taught you, because we did it before. We did it first.
Yeah, I mean, where do you think this actually ends, though, Dr. Starkey? Because if we allow this attack on our history, and many politicians, I think, seem intent on pandering to this. I mean, I should first of all say that I actually find the slogan Black Lives Matter entirely laudable, right? Who wouldn't? It's reasonable. Of course they matter. But it's...
Thanks, Darren, for that. Thanks.
It's the Marxist outfit behind that slogan, that is fundraising to overthrow the state, that is fundraising to come up with strategies to abolish our police force. And just yesterday, actually, I saw a load of tweets from them saying that they want to free Palestine. What the hell has that got to do with Black Lives in the United Kingdom? So where does all of this end? If we think about all of the attacks on Sir Winston Churchill, on Drake, on Nelson, on Peel, on Gladstone, on Grey, is this an attempt, just a naked attempt, to delegitimize the whole, the entire, never mind the curriculum, but everything that Britain has ever stood for?
And indeed the West in general. I mean, that's the intention. I mean, that extraordinary woman, Gopal at Cambridge, says she wants to abolish whiteness. Abolish whiteness. That is her purpose. And you know, to replace it with some kind of rainbow, black, gay, God only knows what else. It is, of course, an absurdity. It won't happen. Some very, very interesting opinion polls have just been done, and it shows that support for, you mentioned taking down Churchill's statue, runs at 10%. 10%. I think eventually this will come up against the rock of that it's a narrow, mean-spirited, dangerous cause. It is, this is in a sense, it's a form of displacement activity. These people lost the referendum. They lost the last election. Again, extinction has faded out. They're used in their own lives. They're used, of course, in the bizarre world of Plato's cave of Twitter to ruling the roost. And they find it very difficult that because they all think it very important, because they all get together and make a snooty noise about it in London, that everybody else doesn't immediately bow down before them. Now, what the right has allowed to happen is universities and the educational system and the BBC and so on have indeed been penetrated and taken over, and indeed the police force. I mean, has there been anything more shocking than the sight of policemen going down on their knees before riot? What is the symbolism of that? There is the French novel Soumission, Wiebeck's novel about the takeover of France by Muslim extremists. Submission, soumission. The going down on the knee is the most obvious gesture of submission. And when the forces of law and order kneel before the rioter, can one be surprised at what's happened? But this does not carry the basic political process. There is a conservative government with a majority. It is, I think it's mistaken simply to largely ignore it. It is simply ignored. The demonstrations will continue until they piddle away. The thing that is alarming are the consequences for the future. As you said, the takeover of our educational system. What I'm hoping, let me tell you what I think should happen. I think that we should probably begin with the universities. And I'm going to say something that I would normally have bitten my tongue at. I think we should start with Cambridge. I think we should start with my own university. And we should say quite straightforwardly that no government funding, either directly in terms of actual funding or indirectly via fees, will be payable to, for example, the English faculty at Cambridge. Because the English faculty at Cambridge is not about academic freedom. There is no academic content in it whatever. What it is about indoctrination. It is a program of Marxist indoctrination dressed up in this preposterous American French, Franco-American language of critical theory. It is the worst form of perverse verbiage. There can be no public benefit for paying for anybody to do it. I wouldn't abolish it because I believe in freedom of speech. But if people want it, they bloody well pay for it themselves. And this seems to me to be the approach we have to take. We should defund the BBC. If the BBC wants to produce propaganda and people want to pay for it, fine. There's no reason why I should. And I suspect this will happen. That what the one thing the government does control, it controls the purse strings. And I think the purse strings will be probably sometimes quite subtly. I mean, the way in which the tourniquet has been applied to the BBC over the 75 license exemption is fascinating. I think we'll see many more examples of that.
Yes, I've got two questions from that then.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe you need to defund the BBC, because to me, as an African, the BBC is the greatest propaganda machine of all times. As in, and I'm not saying this metaphorically, it is the greatest propaganda machine of all times. All pervasive. You know, you go into all these African communities and you set up local BBC there. You have BBC Igbo, BBC Hausa, BBC Yoruba, and you indoctrinate the people, program them to do what you, or to be subservient or servile to your desire. Yes, defund the BBC. It's oh god, it's the greatest propaganda machine of all times.
One question was, I don't know if you saw the, and by the way, I love Cambridge. I think it's one of the most phenomenal, fantastic places on planet Earth. And I think it's desperately sad to see what I would describe as rank hypocrisy from Cambridge University.
Oh, it's worse than hypocrisy. I mean, I weep. You know, I'm a product of it.
I can imagine. I don't know if you saw their defence of free speech for Dr. Gopal, but where, Dr. Starkey, was there robust defence of free speech when Jordan Peterson was hounded out of the university?
Or me.
Yeah, or you, indeed, yes.
Or me over the... I mean, I had that moment in 2015 when the Cambridge fundraising campaign was launched. If I had decided to make a fuss, I could have stopped it in its tracks, and out of loyalty to the university, and also, again, I talked about not wishing to do victimhood. That attack on me happened 3 weeks after James's death.
Wow.
Indeed, I had recorded the key episodes at Cambridge 2 days before his death, and the reason that I didn't see him alive was because I was doing an event at King's College the night before he died, and that was why I didn't get back and see him alive. So,
yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, and if they can't stand up and defend their own, especially at a time like that, you know, all it is that matters. If we look at Cambridge University, if we look at the BBC, if we look at all of these institutions, they are just. We have the police force being told not to apply the law, to selectively apply the law. We have a university selectively applying their robust defence of free speech. And we have a Conservative government that, despite the fact of the polling you just mentioned, Policy Exchange found that 77% of Brits are vehemently opposed to any removal of our history and through monuments, etc.
Correction, Darren. Doctors, well, or maybe you guys are getting it confused. You just said about a poll where 77% of British public are opposed to the removal of monuments. Now, I recall Dr. Starkey mentioning that earlier, and he was talking about Churchill's monument. Now, I'm just saying that there's a big difference between Churchill's monument and monuments. Churchill's monument with no S and monuments with an S. Okay.
So I think at every opportunity, the state or organs of the state seem to be failing us.
I agree.
Is that too harsh? Am I being too harsh?
No, I'm not being harsh at all. I mean, I think that there's a new book just been published about the long march, you know, the long march through institutions, and the long march of the extreme left through institutions has happened in Britain. There's absolutely no doubt about this, whatever. It has to be said, to astonishingly little general effect on public opinion. And people don't want it, not interested, and dislike it. But they control the commanding heights. And there is an extraordinary weakness of response. I mean, part of the trouble has been, of course, that this terrible confusion of the word liberalism. You see, we were talking about my own former politics of extreme form of liberalism, of libertarianism. And I've just come to the conclusion it doesn't work. And that instead, and Edmund Burke's view of the organic nature of society, its rootedness in the past, the importance of gradualism of change, and particularly the importance of conserving institutions. The institutions, these are the central things. But our political conservatism in this country really hardly exists as a serious political movement. I mean, we all...
Okay, you talk about preserving institutions. How about if I tell you that the institutions that allowed for slavery and subsequently racism to exist, a lot of them have not fundamentally changed? If not, things like George Floyd won't be happening. If not, you won't get a lot of immigrants trying to leave Africa to come here. I mean, I could carry on, but this recording is getting long now, so, you know, but it's a long interview. But I have to address this.
People think of Margaret Thatcher as somehow reasserting conservatism. She didn't. Margaret Thatcher reasserted liberal economics. And the late Roger Scruton, Sir Roger Scruton, always points out that the relationship between capitalism and conservatism is by no means clear-cut. I mean, there is one, but it's not absolutely straightforward. But what Thatcher did, she made conservatism purely an economic doctrine. And so you get somebody like Philip Hammond, a very good example of this, or George Osborne, who are absolutely high and dry liberal economists, that's to say, you know, as far as possible, believe in austerity, balanced budgets, and all this kind of thing. But at the same time, personally, I'll let it all hang out liberal. And this is the great problem, that we do not have any significant political figure, and that's to say anybody holding elective office, who is able or willing. Some of the younger MPs certainly know about it, but none of them seem to be willing to articulate properly these ideas, the kind of thing that we've been talking about now. And you know, we have had 10 years of, well, a conservative-dominated coalition, plus Boris Johnson, but setting aside Theresa May, very easy to set Theresa May aside, whether any idea ever penetrated that strange sponge of a brain is unclear. It was certainly never articulated. But if you look at David Cameron on the one hand and look at Boris on the other, they are fundamentally soggy centralist liberals. Mm-hmm. And you know, again, you look at what does Cameron do when he wants to emulate Tony Blair? And you know, he forces gay marriage on his party. I've been one of the most consistently out people in British public life, going right back to the days when it was actually quite difficult, when people like Ian McKellen were still very carefully in the closet. They only pop out when it's safe to do so under John Major, and then of course become leaders. But I was deeply dubious about gay marriage because although I long ago rejected Christianity, I take Christian beliefs seriously. And marriage has, certainly in Catholic Christianity, a sacramental function. And there is an elaborate theology of it, of the relationship of man and woman, and so on and so on. And there's a kind of flagrant rubbing people's nose in something to assert gay marriage. Because, again, most people have lost the sameness of the Christian and the sacramental, it doesn't seem so outrageous. But if you take it seriously, it's very outrageous. So I thought what Cameron did was shocking and casual, but you know, typical of this sort of easy gesture politics. And we've never had any hard gesture politics. We are at the stage where we need them. But again,
you see, this is why I didn't want to get into anything about, you know, conservatism or liberalism, because you talk about hard gesture politics versus easy gesture politics, that Britain lacks hard gesture politics nowadays, yeah, and full of easy gesture politics. Now, to me, what's wrong is wrong. To me, the difference between a hard gesture and an easy gesture of the same thing that's wrong is, say, slavery being a hard gesture and neo-colonialism being a soft gesture. It's still the same thing. Slavery is physical, you can see it, you've got chains on you. Neo-colonialism, it's psychological, you can't see it. It's pervasive, it's even more dangerous. So stop splitting words. You know, to me, hard gesture, easy gesture, politics or conservatism, that's your discussion. But I'm using your own words to buttress my points. You know, now back to hard gesture, soft gesture, racism. What do you call what happened to the Windrush generation? I mean, you know, and that was by Theresa May. You know, what do you call Britain? Or it's, you know, like Theresa May made a statement, and one of a few of your ambassadors have made the same statement. When they come out in support of one Nigeria, oh, we're against the breakup of Nigeria. Nigeria's integrity must remain. That's an upholding of your colonial holdings against the people's will. That's soft gesture. So don't give me this about, oh, like hard gestures gonna make everything okay. For me, what's wrong is wrong, whether it comes soft or whether it comes hard. You know, Britain keeps making these statements about supporting one Nigeria. Meanwhile, this one Nigeria you created, the most abhorrent evil in today's world is going on there. You created hell on earth. Britain, yes. In creating Nigeria, Britain, you created hell on earth. People are dying every day. The country you created today is supposed to be, there's no official war going on, but more people are dying in Nigeria than in Syria, where there's a war going on officially. Even when there's no war going on, people die like chickens in Nigeria. At your sufferance, you milk their oil with your companies, and then you call them third world. You're telling me about hard gestures. Oh, easy gestures. Oh, so it's not that bad because it's easy.
And we talk about this, you're very young and I'm quite old, and we talk about this as though it was something new. Well, elements of it are new, but one of the things that's most striking is the fundamental self-hatred of the British intelligentsia. And it's identified brilliantly by George Orwell in the 1930s and 40s, the great essay on the Lion and the Unicorn, in which he remarks that typical left-wingers would rather be seen stealing from the poor box in church than stand at anthem. Wonderful language. But it goes back much further. It goes back to the Oscar Wilde generation. It goes back to, in Gilbert and Sullivan, it's exactly the same. There's that wonderful moment in Coco's song in the Mikado, those on his little list, those who sing the praises of every country but this and every century but their own. It's peculiarly English. Well, not only English. It's also now become American. Americans have become even more, white Americans have become even more self-hating than we are. But the infection came from Britain. French intellectuals don't hate France. German intellectuals sort of hate bits of German history, but bloody dedicated to the German language. It's a peculiar English form of self-hatred, which is very closely associated with upper-class snobbery. It's all to do with the fact that the plebs drink beer, you, my dear, drink wine. And the more expensive and the more French and the more elaborately unpronounceable the chateau, the better. It's a form of snobbery. And it's, again, well, conversation.
But hold on, David Starkey, you're upper class, you're British upper class. And if most of the British upper class is like this, and from my own experience, most of the white people that understand what black people go through are those with us on the streets. Those that live peacefully with us. But those of you that control society, you guys are far even from your fellow British people on the streets. You guys are on a different world from them. I mean, so what, you think you're lower class, doctor? I mean, what, you drink beer? I mean, the way you pronounce that French wine, I can't even pronounce it like that. And you try and make out loud like, oh, you're, a beer drinker.
Going back full circle, it's, whiny madam. Excuse me.
It's really important to cover Sir Winston Churchill, you see, because the audience will be absolutely desperate for your take on it. But there are a lot of arguments put forward, the Owen Joneses of the world, the Ash Sarkers of the world, who argue that Sir Winston Churchill was a racist and belongs in a museum. What's your take?
Well, of course, Churchill had powerfully racist views. Everybody did. And virtually everybody did in the 1930s. I mean, if we're going to go on and to start picking up people who had undesirable opinions in the 1930s, can I share a great confidence with you, Darren? The institution that I ornamented for 25 years of my career, LSE, is founded by eugenicists, right? The left is soaked in eugenicism absolutely up to its eyeballs. The LSE, the funding for its building came from three guesses who? Rockefeller. And what was the reason? It was because Beveridge and Rockefeller share an interest in eugenics. And there was a department of social biology, and it was said you couldn't walk up and down Hatton Street without retching with the stench of tortured rats in the basement. Come on. And Mary Stopes, and now idolised for abortion and birth control and all the rest of it, believed passionately in the elimination of the disabled. She acclaims Hitler. Wow. As opposed to Churchill destroying Hitler, this got it.
What's the difference between eugenics, slavery, and neo-colonialism? Fundamentally nothing, because it's all white supremacist ideas where one group of people look to themselves as superior to the rest or another group and then seek to do with the other group as they will, even to do away with them if they So like I said, this is why I didn't want to conflate between conservatism, liberalism. What's wrong is wrong. There's conservative racists and there's liberal racists. For whatever reasons, I'm sure they have their different prompts that create that divergence in racism, but it's still racism. So, yeah, talking about Churchill and his racist views. Now, yeah, I admire Churchill. I know that his entire history should not be taken on the account of his racist views. I admire the fact that, he was a strong man, strong enough to stop probably a bigger evil.
Idolised for abortion and birth control and all the rest of it, believed passionately in the elimination of the disabled. She acclaims Hitler. Wow. As opposed to Churchill destroying Hitler, this goddess of liberated womanhood, actually approves of Hitler because of his eugenic program, which finds its natural culmination in the concentration camps, where, remember, they only had the Jews quite late on, after they've got rid of the disabled, the gay, the gypsy, and all the rest of it. So Churchill is a man of his own time. And this, again, is the entire problem with the Black Lives Movement. It is what is so scandalous about people like David Olusoga, who are historians. It is the terrible, fundamental historical sin of anachronism, of reading the values of the present back into the past. If you do that, all human history just becomes an exercise in patronage, in complete cultural patronage. It reminds me, have you ever seen one of the more humiliating moments of my life, which was taking part in James Dream School?
I'm sorry, Dr. David. Evil history has to be called out. Stop trying to run away from responsibility and take some accountability. Britain did what they did. They need to face up to it. And it's about time. You can't keep saying, oh, that was 200 years ago. Oh, that was how it was then, so just deal with it. Oh, you stop with the gimmicks. Because fundamentally, nothing has changed from then. Forget the physical part of it. But fundamentally, what Britain did to Africa and black people was horrible, and it needs to be faced up to.
Oh God, what a torment! Anyway, one of the thicker people in that came up to me to explain that he felt superior to St. Thomas More because he had better opinions. So I looked, this lad was barely capable of writing his name. So I said to him, how many languages do you think Thomas More writes? I don't know. Well, we know he is fluent in at least 3. That is to say, in English, French, and Latin. Indeed, his Latin is so good that he finds it easier, young man, to write in Latin than you do in English. He writes one of the world's great... We just continued like this. And even after about 10 minutes into this extremely dense and ill-furnished skull, with about 1.5 working synapses, the notion that because he, the opinions of now, and Thomas More had the opinions of then. Thomas More, for heaven's sake, believes in torturing people to death. He believes in burning people alive because they are heretics, because they will corrupt the rest of society. That doesn't stop him being a great man. The fact that Churchill thought that Indians were not capable of governing themselves properly. He turns out to be wrong, though the only reason they've been able to do it is because of the structures that were left by the British Raj.
I'm sorry, Dr. David, that the only reason Indians could run themselves was because of the structure the British left. Really? Like as if they were savages before you got there. Come on, like I keep saying, you're a historian. You're supposed to know all this stuff. So what? If the British never came to India, they could never have run themselves. Like there was no civilizations there before the British came. I mean, what about the Mughal Empire, the one you destroyed and took over? Look, Churchill was a sycophant. And like I said, a sycophant is a sycophant is a sycophant. If they did something evil, it needs to be called out. You can't say, oh, but they also did this great stuff, so we just somehow sweep the evil part of what they did under the carpet. Hey, I didn't coin the term, the evil that men do lives on after them. I didn't coin it. So, and you can't tell me because this is the way it was back then. So yeah, that's just, you can't even tell me that every British person alive back then had such racist views. You can't, and I'm ready to debate you on that. You can't tell me that every British person alive then had such racist views.
Churchill again took the attitude during the famous famine that feeding Britain was more important than feeding India. Now, he is a war leader.
You see, this kind of mentality comes from, and I keep talking about the systems, the structures that were left, that enabled slavery to happen and that are still intact. That the structure that enables this kind of mentality to be bred into society is like the education. Clearly, Dr. Starkey went to good schools. He studied history, British history, but he seemed to have only studied a cherry-picked curriculum. A cherry-picked curriculum that just says everything great and hides all the sins. And this is what creates such a mentality. So yes, maybe you do need to decolonize the curriculum so that you get a broader perspective of the modern world, because the world's not back then, which seems to be the stem of this kind of mentality in British society.
He takes terrible decisions every day. This is not, deciding what shall we have on our cereal this morning? Are we going to have raspberries on our cereal, or are we going to have blueberries? These are the decisions of life and death that will determine whether you and your country survive or an evil dictatorship conquers you. You take very, very hard and brutal decisions. And Churchill took them, and his greatness was that he was able to take them. And again, it's going back again to what I was saying about Puritanism. It is this idea that a wrong view on race is the equivalent of original sin. It's the sin of the Holy Ghost. If you are responsible for that, all of your achievements in the past, the present, or the future are negated, and you are to be cancelled. You are to be obliterated. This is...
Yes. Do you know why? Because any brain that can hold a racist view, there's something wrong. If you can think that you're so it and you're better than everyone else, then there's really something wrong. And that's why people call you into question when you express racist views. It's your faculties in tune with modern times. Because even in primitive times, by primitive time standard, racism, slavery is barbaric, is savage. There's nothing civilized about it. Look, to put my money where my mouth is, I'm ready to have a debate. I'm not just making this recording just to have some random say. Because British society needs to face this. I'm not saying all of British society is guilty, but there's a class of guilty ones, and they need to face it.
A deranged attitude. One cannot construct human relations on this basis. We have to acknowledge that wonderful phrase of L.P. Hartley: the past is another country. They do things differently. They have different values.
So suddenly history has no significance. Oh, the past is another country. This is again classic trying to skip accountability and responsibility. 200 years ago. Let's move on. Come on.
Proper attitude as a historian is to respect those values. You do substitute them for your own, though occasionally some people have, the Catholic fascination with the Middle Ages, Victorian fascination with the Middle Ages. But what you essentially do, you recognize that you're there to explore difference. What the Owen Joneses and other such shallow creatures want is to impose uniformity. They prattle perpetually about diversity. They want to make everything the same. They want to make the past the same as the present. They want to make everybody's opinions the same as theirs. They are the most absolute totalitarian.
You see, this mentality I'm talking about is the kind of mentality that could have facilitated slavery. If you can read evil, if you can read a horrible history and not be touched or moved by it, and just simply say, oh, well, that was in the past, then if you were in the past, you would have done it. And if it's still happening today, you will do it. Did you hear me? If to have such a mentality, to say, oh, well, yeah, what I've just read, even as horrible as it is, yeah, it's just history. If you can somehow just detach yourself from it and not feel anything, just because it's in your view, it's the past. With such a mentality, you would have taken part in slavery. And if slavery is happening today, you will take part, because you just look at, well, it's the sign of the times. Yeah, carry on.
Tolerant, dangerous people. And this fact simply has to be recognized, it has to be repeated, and it needs to be said loud and clear and whatever.
My final question, Dr. Starkey, we sort of highlighted earlier, actually we've highlighted it throughout this discussion. But to end, I wonder if you might reflect on how we conservatives might actually fight back against this. Is it just to ignore it, or you know, with a biased state broadcaster, with an education system that we mentioned is infiltrated by Marxists, with conservative politicians that don't seem all that fussed about conserving anything? Do we stand a chance? People are looking at you, Dr. Starkey, for help and reassurance, to give them that optimism.
Wait, hold on. People looking to him. You see, that's why the problem never changes. If it's a mentality like this that's being looked up to come up with the answers or the solutions, and they don't understand the problem, then how are they going to change it? How are they going to come up? Where are they going to come up with the solution from? What, people look up to him with such views?
I do in my own little ways. I think what we've all got to do, and is why I admire you and what you're doing. We've just got to dare to speak out. I mean, what the Black Lives Matter, the Owen Joneses, the Laurie Pennies, and all the rest of this.
Yes, I support speaking out, so that we can tell whose view, who has what view and what view. Yes, I support that.
World is, they think they can impose silence on us, and they think they can shut us up, and they think they can make us go away.
No, please speak up, just so that we know who holds what views and what views. Whoever is trying to impose silence on you, please stop. I beg you, please stop.
We mustn't be shut up. We mustn't be silenced. We mustn't go away. And to really bring the thing full cycle, Darren, can I quote to you what I've been in many ways my real motto, my real working motto, going back to the very, very early days of Gay Lib. Wonderful slogan, better blatant than latent. We need to be blatant Tories.
Yes, blatant. Be real. Enough of the patronizing and hiding iron claws in velvet gloves. Yes, let's know what's what. Let's know if this is going to come to the fight it's looking like it's going to come to, because you can't keep a people oppressed and expect that they'll keep taking it for centuries. So be blatant. Let's know. Are you going to kill us all? Are you going to kill us all? Yeah, we so-called blacks who should be happy with the way it is now, because it's not as bad in the past as it was. It's not as bad as it was now in the past. So yeah, please.
Tory blatancy. It's a good slogan, but I know
Tory
I like
blatancy.
Blatant. We need to be blatant.
I like that too.
In your face.
Loud and proud.
loud, out and proud. Matthew Paris put it very nicely, that the difficulty wasn't coming out as gay, it was coming out as Tory. We've all got to come out and rub their noses in blue.
Beautifully put. We'll end it there. Thank you so much, Dr. Starkey, for giving up your time.
Thank you.
Man. Like I said, I wish I recorded my facial expressions the first time I saw this, because Dr. Starkey is someone I used to hold in a lot of regard, and like I said earlier, I actually see him as my history teacher. I didn't study history in school, but I always just studied history on the side, and he taught me the core of English history. And he didn't even just teach any English history. A lot of his teachings, or a lot of his lectures about history, were centered around the aristocracy. He's mingled with them, he sounds like them, he acts like them, and now it's clear he holds a lot of the views of the aristocracy that was in charge during the time the evil of slavery was happening. And this mentality is still with us today. British society needs to face this. You can sit back and act like, well, it's not my problem. I ain't got anyone in chains. Yeah, it was 200 years ago. But the fact still remains, Britain, via means of neo-colonialism, is holding the destiny of at least 500 million Africans by controlling her colonies via proxy, or via proxy of puppet warrant chief presidents. Classic example, Nigeria. That bullshit needs to stop. A time will come when the Africans really won't have it anymore. Right now, the Africans just want freedom and to live in peace. A time will come when they'll want revenge. And don't think that when that time comes that you just kill a few people and they'll just stop. No. When people get to the point where they've got nothing to lose, why do you think movements like Al-Qaeda happen? I didn't mean to make this personal against Dr. Starkey. Like I said, he's someone I grew up having a lot of respect for. But I saw this as an opportunity to advise those in British society that still hold such views. It's a new day. The world has changed. Unless you're ready to kill all of us, we Africans, or so-called black people, things have to change. Or else, be my guest, start killing. I mean, it's not, it's not like your policies ain't already killing us, but, maybe even stop beating around the bush and just start openly mowing us down. I mean, when we hear comments from Parliament talking about recolonizing Zimbabwe, and leaks coming out about sparking wars in Africa so that you can recolonize parts of it again in the 21st century, UK Parliament, come on, parliamentarians coming out with stuff like this. Come on. 400 years is enough. We can either live in this world together in peace and happy, and yes, there are a lot of good British people that really want, there are a lot of good British people that don't hold such views. I'm not trying to make this about every single person in Britain, but the construct of Britain, the entity that is Britain, the structures, the foundations upon which it's built, is sucking the lifeblood out of a lot of innocent Africans. It was built on sucking that blood. It sucked that blood enough, and it's still sucking that blood in places like Nigeria today. Because we know British companies exploit Nigeria as willy-nilly. That nonsense needs to stop. I would like to make a few corrections to my recording. The first one is a misquote, a mistake in my statement at the time of 13 minutes and 40 seconds into the recording, when I said talking about colonialism and neo-colonialism and the structures they left behind, which keeps African countries in poverty at your sufferance. What I meant to say was, which keeps African countries in poverty at their sufferance to the benefit of Britain. Another mistake or misquote I made was at 1 hour, 11 minutes, 17 seconds. When I said Britain went around the world looting everywhere, and now you call yourself third world. Oh, we're rich. What I meant to say was, now you call yourself first world. Oh, we're rich. And I'd like to add to that how, and this is an example of how these fundamental structures I talk about haven't changed. You know, back then, during slavery, you called yourself civilized. You called us savages. And then today, you call yourself rich. You call us poor. You call yourself first world. You call us third world. You call yourself developed. You call us underdeveloped. Like it's our own desire to be underdeveloped, when most of the world's resources comes from our land, but somehow we choose to be underdeveloped. Really, is that not your structure in the background keeping us underdeveloped with neo-colonialism? Right. Another mistake I made, the third mistake, was at the hour, 1 hour, 14 minutes, and at around 10 seconds. Well, actually, sorry, that was not my mistake. Actually, sorry, that was my third mistake at 1 hour, 32 minutes, and 11 seconds, where I said people die like chickens in Nigeria at your sufferance. Again, that was meant to be where people die like chickens in Nigeria at our sufferance to your benefit. And a few other things I'd like to add. As a historian, David Starkey, I really can't believe you'd compare Catholic emancipation to slavery. Where's your perspective? Seriously, where is your perspective? How can you compare Catholic emancipation to slavery? Oh, let me ask you, can you compare Catholic emancipation to the Holocaust? Yeah, I think I'll be waiting for that reply for a while. And then I'll say this. to people with such mentality in Britain today, and to those who choose not to be aware of it. If you're complicit in a crime, you're just as bad. You're just as guilty. You're just as criminal. If you hold the view that, oh, well, yeah, it wasn't my ancestors, well, it wasn't me, that was 200 years ago, and you refuse to ask the question, well, but why are they still complaining? You try and play complicit. Well, it wasn't me, I didn't do it. Why are they still complaining? Then you just as guilty and as bad. If you refuse to recognize that you can call yourself first world today because other people have paid the price in blood and still paying, because if you've not changed those structures, you are just as bad, you are just as guilty, you are just as criminal. I saw what happened during the credit crunch. I thought they said Britain was broke. But while everybody else was reading from the credit crunch, London was practically rebuilt. Where did that money come from? And then I'll say this also about the so-called debate to decolonize the education system. And I'll tie it into the history Britain has of lying about history. You see, when you go about concocting lies, at some point you lose yourself, you lose perspective. So you went round for 200 years selling the lie that the blacks, or the so-called Negroes, they were inferior, they were savages, they were pagans, they were no more than animals. And to sell this message, you went around selling to your people, yeah, well, if they are superior, then if the so-called Negroes are inferior, then you, the whites, are superior. I mean, lies upon lies. So now, in today's world, I find myself thinking, who's actually carrying the bigger burden? Who's actually got the more messed up generation? Is it those that were lied to and told they were inferior? Or somehow they found out that was a lie, and that everybody was actually, nobody is superior to the other? Or is it those that were lied to that they were superior? And then they grow up to find out, well, if I'm supposed to be superior to him, how come he does this and that better than me? Stop messing up the people of the planet. I mean, why all these lies? What, just for profit? Okay, profit, yeah. How's the taste of your profit? Sucking profit, blood money made on the blood and backs and sweat of innocent people who never did you anything. They never did you. No Negro ever sailed to Britain to conquer or to declare territory. Why did did we beg you to come? We didn't. In 400 years of contact with Western Europeans, Africans have benefited nothing. If anything, Our survival is now dangling because of the chaos you've caused to us. In 400 years of dealing with you, we've gained nothing. We've been going backward and backward and backward. Because I can tell you, the life of an African today is far worse than his life before your forefathers came. Yes, I've read the history books. They were free and happy in the jungle. They were civilized. In fact, their civilizations are older than yours. Their civilizations were not geared to war, slavery, and oppression. Like you've gone around exporting to the entire planet. You've done all this stuff, and instead of being accountable for it, you're telling everybody to just forget it. Really. No wonder you went around pushing your religion. Oh, if they slap you, turn the other cheek. Because I'm sure they knew this day would come when you try and tell everybody to just forget it. That was 200 years ago. That is in the past. Let's move on. No, Britain, you have to face this history. Especially that part of you that's that's primarily culpable. Elite. Yes. All those estates, those companies, those mansions. Most of those things were gotten off the backs, the sweat and blood and tears of people who never did you anything. Anyway, this nonsense can't carry on forever. It can't. Our forefathers, they were naive. They saw strangers. They thought, another part of the human family. They opened their arms in welcome, not knowing that as these strangers were coming to hug them, these strangers were going to stab them in the back. And upon all this, all we still just wanted was, okay, please, enough. Let us live in peace. Just leave us be. We be in peace. But no. You got to exert yourself. Look, to prove what to who? What are you? But are you any better? Just because you conquered? Just because you're now first world? In your mind, are you better? The so-called conquest, is it really civilization? Like I said, it's a modern world now. It's a new day. Britain needs to examine itself. Thanks for listening.